Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm super excited to be here. I'm joined with Deb Dixon from Somerville Public Schools at WinterHill. And before we get started, feel free to head on down to the chat and introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and Halloween was just this past week, so what was the coolest Halloween costume that you saw? And it could have been your own, that's also okay. All right, great. We got people from all over coming in, from New Jersey, from Guatemala, hello, from Massachusetts. That's where I am from, or not where I'm from, but where I am, and where Deb is as well. Hello from Washington and Texas. So just a few housekeeping notes here. If you're having any problems with the audio, please check your sound on your computer. We have a Q&A section where you can post your questions. We also got a number of questions ahead of time, so we'll try and get to many of those as well at the end, but feel free to also drop us some questions in the Q&A. Nice. We got some Pac-Man and Ghosts. Those are great. Deb and I were chatting earlier about these Halloween candy shoots that we saw, people giving out candy, which we thought was really creative.
Yeah, our
Deb,
favorite house that we went, I was going to say the favorite house we went to you had to scream for candy, and someone from the second floor went down one of the PVC chutes, the candy. My kids love that. My son dressed up as Pikachu from Pokemon, and my daughter was a robot Karen, she said. Someone said, take me to your leader, take me to your manager. That was her funny sense of humor.
I love that. That's very cute. My partner is a big fan of Pokemon Go, so he would appreciate your son's Pikachu costume. Awesome. Well, I think we'll get started just with the introductions while more people come on in. So my name is Lauren Watkins. I'm the marketing lead here at Unruly Studios, the creators of Unruly Spots. We're all about mixing play and STEM and getting kids active while they're learning, but we'll talk more about that later. I'll let Deb introduce herself.
I'm Deb Dixon. I'm a library media teacher from the WinterHill School in Somerville, Massachusetts, which is near Boston. And this is my 19th year at WinterHill, and I'm very excited to be part of this. And Splats and coding have been a lot of fun in the virtual and in-person world.
Awesome. Yeah, Somerville, fun fact, or WinterHill was one of the first schools that we ever worked with, so they were very instrumental in giving us tons of feedback on everything that we do here at Unruly. So, question for everyone before we get started. On a scale of 1 to 10, how crazy does this school year feel so far? Give us your honest answers, and it's been pretty crazy. So 1 being total walk in the park, and 10 being pretty crazy. Write us in the chat. How you doing?
10,000,
I see some big numbers.
I'm with you. I'm with you. Yeah. Been a school year like no other so far.
Yeah. Deb, tell everyone a little bit about your situation. Are you virtual? Are you, doing some hybrid? What's the situation at WinterHill?
Sure. Starting on March 12th, we went remote and have been remote for the end of last school year. We started this school year remote. We're just working on plans to get our high needs populations back at school starting in December, and we're trying to figure that out, and we might be moving around some different programs at different schools. So it's been very interesting to see how this is going to work, because I have one of the oldest schools in the city. We're trying to get everything ventilation-wise safe, and so kids can start going back to school, and hopefully that can happen soon.
Awesome, thank you. And one more question for everybody. How are you incorporating SEL into your classes? So today's seminar is all about STEM and SEL and combining them and, really prioritizing your students' social and emotional health and learning. So write us in the chat at the, on your screen, how are you incorporating SEL into your classes right now? And Deb, I realize you're about to share a lot of this in the webinar already, but just sort of quick spark notes, how are you thinking about incorporating SEL into your virtual classes right now?
Sure. I consider myself lucky enough that I get to teach every student in my school from pre-K through 8th grade. That also has an interesting scenario. It's a lot of classes over the course of a week. And I like looking at SEL as a big community builder, especially at the beginning of the year. Kids are nervous and anxious, and I want to address that and build that sense of community so kids are more willing to take risks and be engaged in what we're learning when we get into the more academic curriculum.
Great, and I'm seeing a lot of similar answers from people in the chat here. Some of them have dedicated SEL time, but others are doing some mindfulness or morning meetings, doing a temperature check. I love that idea. Great ideas. So before we get into our 4 tips for combining SEL and STEM, I wanted to sort of talk about, what does SEL really mean and why is it important? Deb, what do you think?
Sure. Well, the SEL, the social emotional learning, it's important because I think without that sense of community, kids aren't going to be willing to do the academic or aren't going to be able to fully participate in the academic part of the day. And I think it's just so important to show kids that we're struggling and we need help and how we deal with frustrations and anxiety, and to get them prepared with tools that they can use as well in the virtual, hybrid, or back in person world, depending on what part of the school year you're in.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to call out too that, you are a library media specialist, and so, SEL is not in your job title. So, is this a recent thing that you've started to think about, or have you always sort of thought about SEL as part of, your programming in your classroom?
We've been dabbling in it in a little bit. We've, done some different things like responsive classroom training over the past 5 or 6 years, but we've really put a focus on social emotional learning in maybe the past 3 years. And we've really made a point to look at it starting with this school year with the virtual setting and how so many kids having high needs and needing this kind of help and support, and our staff as well need the support. So it's been a big focus, and a lot of staff and students have really bought into it being such an important part of the community.
Yeah, and buy-in is so important for these things, absolutely, across the school and with students. So I wanted to talk about the CASTLE framework. I used to call it CASTLE, but I know it's called CASTLE now. You know, what is the CASTLE framework, and sort of what are the you know, important segments of it that you really look to sort of guide your SEL practices when you're integrating SEL into your classes and with your kids?
All of these areas are really important, and I think, you know, I talk a lot with students about, you know, just how they're feeling, and being able to put a name on some of their emotions is important. The motivation, the self-management, the you know, the social awareness. But what I really like to look at and build a big sense of and work on are those relationship skills, building that sense of a team. I think is really important, because then I tell the kids, whether we're reading, doing engineering, or doing computer programming, none of those activities need to be done all alone and in isolation, and that we get better at any of these things by looking to each other and asking for help, and being able to say, I need help with this, or can you help me? And just try to build that sense that it's not just the students on one side, me on the other, that all of us together are experts in different things, and we can all be there to help and support each other. And I think that all leads into the part that's towards the end, that responsible decision making, and just in solving problems. It can be problems in stories, problems in life, problems in, you know, just in general. It could be how to make a prototype work better. All of these things, the self-awareness, the management, the relationship skills, then help when it comes to kids producing work and building answers and products, and that sense of community, I find, has been really crucial.
Absolutely. And do you think that because oftentimes as the library media specialist, you're the one who's introducing students to things like coding, you know, block coding, and doing problem solving and working through those things that can sometimes lead to stressful feelings? So do you think that that those kind of SEL competencies really help sort of definitely with the problem solving aspect of what you teach?
Absolutely. Because I think when you're talking about, I teach a lot of engineering also with students, and that kind of the failure not being bad can be a big thing to work on. And that happens in a lot of, as you get into higher levels of block coding, the frustration is real for all of us. And I think it's good to tell the students and show them it failed, but failure is supposed to happen. It's not a bad thing. It can be successful by, let's try something different. Let's work with somebody else. What's a good suggestion? Let's work through this. And the failure is kind of a bigger part of the process and an important part of it. And I think by connecting that SEL with STEM and with coding has been really important, and that I can't do this, I'm done. Like, that's not the atmosphere we have in our class. So I think that's so important that, oh, that's really cool, that didn't work. Let's look at what happened, and let's test it, and let's try it again. What happens if we do this little change? Oh, that made it worse. Let's try something else. And then just that, how failure can be exciting, I think can be really important in STEM and also in life in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like somebody said in the chat, they called it failing forward, and I couldn't agree more. Even at Unruly, we love it when our customers find bugs. We think that that's great, because that's an opportunity for us to improve something and to make it better and to solve a problem. And like you said, Deb, problem solving it's exciting. It's like a game. It's a puzzle. So we definitely love that. And, you know, of course, learning how to, as Danielle put it, fail forward. I like that. It just makes for such a better learning experience. All right. So write us in the chat, which CASTLE core competency do you want to focus on the most? So I'm going to back up here and let you see what the core competencies are again. we've got self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Which one is sort of the key one that you'd like to focus on? Write us in the chat. And what do you think, Deb? Which one, I know they're all important, but which one kind of stands out to you?
Like the standout for me is like that teamwork I like. And I know something I'm thinking of just as a parent of school-age kids that I'm looking at is just that looking at like my daughter, that self-management, that being able to identify, I need help with this, I don't understand it, can I do this, can someone help me? Being able to do that, then dealing with the frustration, I think, has been, as a parent, that's what I try to work on with her. And then as a teacher, I really love the teamwork part of it.
Yeah, teamwork is very important for us too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we're going to get into the 4 ways, but before we do, why combine SEL and STEM? We talked about this earlier. Deb, do you want to kind of give us your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that failure we were talking about is a big deal, that dealing with that resilience. But I think right away at the beginning of the year that's been really helpful is to get that, to focus on that engagement piece, to get the students connected with your class and what you're doing and as a community, and that makes them more comfortable with being able to try more of the scarier activities if something's new, because there's all different kinds of coding and STEM and activities, and a lot of new can be kind of scary and frustrating, but having that community and having that engagement to start with really helps with that resilience right there. And it's that, and I'm seeing it in the chat also, it really is, it's all subjects. You want to have that collaborative atmosphere and that teamwork, whether it's in library, whether it's in math class, whether it's in ELA, whether it's in physical education class. All of these classes need these same kind of skills because they're skills they're going to need later. And I like that part at the end where you want to identify and you want to talk about that frustration and learn how to deal with that and how to work with that, and also be able to celebrate those exciting moments. And I think when you have that community that you've already built, those celebrations can be even extra meaningful to share them, rather than just being your celebration. It's the team, it's the group celebration when anybody has that success.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I love that community piece of, being excited for your team and your teammates. I wasn't an athletic person growing up, so I didn't do team sports, but as I've gotten older, I've done them more. And it is super exciting when you can celebrate with your team on a big win. So that is a big one. And somebody asked in the chat, what does STEM stand for? So I will describe SEL, social emotional learning, and STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. Good question. All right, so we're going to hop into our 4 ways to combine SEL and STEM. So the first one is collaborative play. And this is an image of you, Deb. This was pre-COVID. We had come to visit your school to see you teach a class with Splats. So do you want to kind of explain what does collaborative play mean, and sort of how do you approach this with your teaching of kind of block coding here in engineering?
Sure. One of the things I really like about collaborative play, and I think really works for my students, is I'm in an extremely diverse school. Our students come from a variety of different cultures. They speak all different languages at home. They have all different kinds of cognitive needs. Our school's autism program, our city's autism program is at my school. So sometimes doing things that are only just text-based is a little hard to get all of the students engaged. But by having something that involves that interactive visual element of being able to code something and then immediately play it has been really great for students to be able to see right away. You're not coding to get a character to move on your screen. You're coding something that you can immediately interact with. You're making rules of a game that you're playing. You're designing the sound effects, the colors, and you can immediately try it and see what that code means. That you're saying coding, but seeing that program and what it does has been really helpful with my students. And anytime you can play or run across the library, I find has been really great for the students. We've really enjoyed doing that. And it's certainly not a quiet library when we're in person, because I want to get kids up and out of their seats. Especially now, even virtually, we spend so much time at our desks, on our devices, on our computers all day. You want to get up and see something and do something, interact with it. So that's why I really like the play, whether we're in person or virtual. It's so important.
Yeah, and we will have the chance to give a few examples of activities that you've done with your students, both in person and virtually. So we can see some examples of that in a little bit. But you sort of started to touch on, how are you combining coding and play and collaborative play now that you're virtual? What does that look like?
Sure. So some of the things that are a little different now is students, and if we used a lot of the Splats when we were in person, which we'll hear some more specifically about, but there's these plastic like tiles that you could step on, throw things at, they make sound effects. They're really fun to code and play with, but students don't have those at home because we're not in my library anymore while at home. So we can virtually use them, but sometimes we'll play games in a different way. We did a lot of like icebreaker and community building games in the virtual world that we would play. So as long as students had enough of an internet connection where they could see my screen when I'd share it in class, we'd play some different games, scavenger hunt type of games, and I'd show them the code and, all right, let's play this, and how many things in this category can you name? And they would see in the code what we were changing to get that to work, and then we'd get a chance to play it. And after we did a lot of those community building icebreaker games, then we started to work on introducing the coding so they could each have their own accounts and start building their own games and programs. And I find that's been really helpful in their willingness to try this new thing. And for some of them, if they're new to our school, coding is very new to them, and it can be scary that it's new. And I think playing with it first makes you more willing to buy in, to learn about it and tinker with it after.
Yeah, absolutely. And making it fun. Like, who doesn't want to do something fun? And I liked your example too of using the things around your house. So it's like you're not requiring them to bring special material. They can take anything from around their house. And that's one that we're going to be playing later too.
I was going to say, it's fun when you hear your students' families saying, are you supposed to be doing that? What are you doing? And it's like, no, we're playing this game. And then they're talking about it and explaining it to their families. And that's kind of a fun way to spread it beyond the classroom also, because now families are in the classroom all day, every day. So that's kind of fun too, that the families can see and experience what we're doing.
Yep, absolutely. One of my favorite stories from this was also pre-COVID, but one of our educators in Hawaii, through one of his units, he had them at the end have their parents come in, and then they get to teach the parent the game that they coded, which I loved. So the two key questions here that we like to talk about at Splats, but then also this is definitely inspired by you. We wrote this social emotional learning letter that we pair with all of our lesson plans, and it was, something that guided us when we created our SEL lesson pack. But the two questions that we like to talk about are, did you have fun, and did you learn something? So how do you use these questions to sort of guide the SEL discussion in your classes?
Sure, and I think it's important, to point out to students that both are important. You're not just playing these games for the sake of just having fun. There's also a reason we're doing it and trying to learn at the same time. And I think finding a way to kind of show the kids that you're willing to do these fun activities that have a purpose behind it, and talking about what did we learn, what did you notice, or did anyone try this a different way? And just seeing the different things and having those conversations after you're doing something that's a lot of fun has been really important in our class, and has made like the discussions even more rich, because they have like these fun experiences that they've had, and they're more willing to share what they've been learning. And I know I haven't been a kid in a long time, but you remember the fun things that you did in school. And if you want them to kind of be using these strategies again, but being able to do the fun stuff over again and really learn it and remember it and be able to use it again, I think, will be really useful for the students.
Absolutely. I think it's helpful for teachers as well to think about these two questions when they're planning out their activities, making sure that, if a student in the class, either said no to one of these two questions, then like, let's talk about it. How can we change that? And what's the impact that you've seen in your students from mixing SEL with, integrating that into your STEM classes and into your programs?
I think what's nice, and as I've been doing more STEM and SEL and coding in my classes, it's nice to see kind of the journey the kids have gone on. When you have some students that you give them a set of tools, like a pile of Legos, and they go, no, I need the instruction booklet because I have to build it this way, because there's only one right answer. And then now kids are more like, oh, this is interesting. Let me see how this works. And I think that has been really important to set that up with the students. And I've noticed just with the more doing the play and the coding and the STEM along with the SEL has been great in getting the kids to be like, I can't do this, I'm not doing it. So I think we've all had that student that gets frustrated, like, I'm not doing this. And then when it's like, okay, let's try this. Let's see what happens. And it's never when you're doing a coding activity, it's never all the way done. There's always there's not one finish line. It's like you're working on it and it's okay, let's add to it. What can you do next? What happens if? And then I think seeing that there's not just an activity that's just done and being able to keep going. I've seen the kind of the building that sense of being able to keep going and stick to it and want to keep that lesson activity keep going longer has been great, and I've noticed that. And I think having that community where kids are willing to talk and discuss and ask each other for help has been great, because I tell them I'm not an expert in coding. None of this was around when I was in school when I was younger. I'm learning this while you're learning it. So the expert might be somebody else in the room. And let's ask and see if someone else has an idea. Or I got stuck at the same point. Who else tried something different? I think it's been great when they see I'm not just the expert, that they need to, let's rely on each other and work together to try to figure this out.
Right. And I think that combining it with play, we had one of the key questions, did you have fun and did you learn something? And when we say, did you have fun, of course, problem solving can be frustrating, but when you have the support of your classroom community and when it's rooted in playfulness and games, the stakes don't seem so high. And you can turn that frustrating problem into something. It's not just on your shoulders. You have your team that you're working with, and also you're working to do something fun. You're building a game. You get to play it together. And I think that's why the play part and is so important.
Mm-hmm.
So the second one is community building. So what are the key SEL aspects of building sort of a classroom community? What does it mean to have a classroom community?
I think a lot of that is when you're building that community, it's kind of like that family aspect of it, in that you know that everyone is there to help you and to work together to try to solve the problem. And I think that kind of sense that we're all together on this in a community is great, and you're willing to take a risk, and they see all of us failing and trying again, and it's fine, and we have fun doing it. I think that's been really nice and makes the kids more willing to engage on some of the trickier things that they haven't done before when they have that community there and that willingness to try something new and to know that they'll be supported in that process is really important.
Absolutely. And how do you do that during virtual learning? Sort of what does that look like in person versus virtual, and what are some of the things that you've done differently with virtual learning to build that community?
Sure. I mean, some things that are a little different, and where I teach students have the option of having their cameras off during our virtual lessons. So it could be sometimes I'm talking to a screen of black rectangles with just their names, and that can be hard. I can't see who has a puzzled look on their face or who's really excited, and trying to find different ways for the kids to show that. You know, can you give me a thumbs up? Can you flash your camera on? Show me how far you've gone in the project, or let's do a game where I want to see this. And I think you have to kind of go about it in a different way, because I don't always get those immediate responses from the students being in the virtual world. But I think having these different activities that are there, and at the beginning, normally I just do in-person school, we do like one fun game at the beginning of the year, the first class, and then we get going. And I've spent more time in the virtual world doing different activities that require different amounts of participation, whether it can be something that can just be in the chat or something I need to be able to visually see, and kind of having different ways of doing it. Spending more time with that, I think, has helped students as we're now really getting into a couple months of school now, more the harder, higher level academic things. It's been nice having that already, taking those weeks away from what I would normally be teaching to build that kind of community. Because every week someone is having a hard time with something, technologically or personally or whichever, and by taking those steps ahead of time has been really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Giving them that space to connect, but also giving them their space if they need to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the other point that we talked about was, you know, we're living in this world where there's a lot of things out of our control right now. So how do we, you know, student-led learning is such a great way to, you know, delve into SEL and learning new things. So, you know, how important is student-led learning and SEL, and sort of what's that connection there?
I think what's nice, once you share some of your power that you have as a teacher and put it onto the students, I think when it's their project on their topic, that they're more willing to go past just that bare minimum, just that little bit so it's done and we can move on. It's their project that they're interested in, that they're willing to work on and bring to the group to work through, has been really nice. And I think what's been nice also is I've had students lead some of the instruction. So many teacher tools, you're using something and it looks different from the student view. So I've had kids struggle, I don't know how to get to that point in the slides, I can't find it. I was able to get there, and I'll have that student share their screen, be able to talk through, here's what I did, here's how to use this, you know, and they'll be the teacher and take some of that power. And it's thank you for doing that, and being able to help our whole class has been really nice, like confidence booster. They're able to have some power and control over it, and it really, I've noticed, has helped with the engagement in class.
I love that, giving them some of the power to, and when they're teaching each other, that's such a powerful thing. What have you seen as the benefits of kind of student-led learning and giving that power back to the students. And one other thing I wanted to bring up was you talked about just being open with your students. You know, I don't have all the answers. I don't know everything. And I think that's very powerful in the, you know, student-led learning, is you're asking them like, okay, we're a team now. We have to figure this out. You know, we can lean on each other and figure it out together. So what are some of the benefits that you've seen from student-led learning with regards to SEL?
Sure. What's nice with this, when a lot of student choices on student-led learning, it's not always the same student that's the leader in the group, because they're picking what they're interested in doing and they're making choices. So the expert is not going to just be the person that's always participating. The expert might be somebody different that's not normally the first person to raise their hand or share. They're willing to be the person that's sharing their screen and talk us through how to do something, because they were able to be engaged and to bring that lesson to that next level, and they solve the problem. It's like, oh, I'm not sure how to do that. Who was able to do it? It's like, oh, great, Lauren figured it out. Lauren, show us how to. And it kind of builds up a variety of students versus just the same people participating or just the teacher talking. It's kind of nice to have a balance of voices and experiences in the classroom. And I think having that community and having the students have such a big say really provides them an opportunity to share those experiences and value them and build that confidence in their learning and in who they are.
That's very true. You know, helping others is such a great way to build empathy too. So what are your strategies for student-led learning at home? You know, things are a little different with virtual, and you're pretty much all virtual right now. So sort of how do you give students that power? Besides, you mentioned one example of, you know, letting that student share their screen. Are there any other strategies?
Sure. I think what's nice is finding different ways for students to engage, because I'm noticing some of the students have like a poor internet signal and have trouble doing a lot of the activities. So I'll have students like disconnect with our platform we're using, do the activity, and then come back, because they're having trouble having both things open at the same time. And then they're like, oh, okay, so it's not a big deal, that it's not that stressful situation. My computer's not working. If I open up another tab, I have this issue. I'm like, okay, exit our meeting, do this, and then come back. And I think has been nice for them to be able to not be as focused on my technology's not working, I can't hear my sound, my microphone sounds like I'm in a fishbowl, you know, my sound is really awful. By just giving them different opportunities and different types of learning, whether it's, and I saw people in the chat doing like a Flipgrid, something that could be a video component, might be nice for some students, and having other kids do something that might be a writing, who can use the chat, who can use interactive things like a Nearpod or a Peer Deck, or using things like Padlets where they can see their different student ideas all at once. So trying to have that variety of lessons and experiences so that you can engage kids no matter what type of technology need they have or home situation that they have. They're able to engage in some way and become almost like the expert in that method of doing things, and then they're more able to help others if that's been really successful for them.
Nice. And we had chatted about things like choice boards. Mm-hmm. Have you used those choice boards before, and can you give any examples of
Sure. We just had we had parent conferences yesterday, and we had one parent was saying, I really loved your specialist bingo board from the spring. And that was several months ago, and she was still talking about it, how her 3 sons really loved it. And it was something our specialists at our school are our library, art, music, physical education, and we have a drama class. And all 5 of us together made our team to support each other. And the kids liked seeing that we're all together and united. We made a bingo board. We had a variety of different activities, read a silly story. It was, act out this scene, do these sit-ups, and draw your favorite character from this. And they had to check off different things, and they could pick the ones they wanted. So if push-ups aren't your thing, you don't have to do that square, and you can still do the activity. And there were lots of choices and ways to engage, seeing what tools or materials you had available. You still had plenty of choices and opportunities to practice and do and engage with the learning.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I always loved the choices. Even when I was a student, the choice boards were awesome. Always so much fun. We had a good question. Is sharing your experience the same as student-led learning? What do you think, Deb?
It's kind of like, I feel like students sharing their experiences can be part of it, but it doesn't necessarily be the only way for students to lead their learning. And if like the end result is, trying to think of a good example, but if you have kids, if you're doing whatever kind of research project and you have your kids that are super into video production or doing a video, someone else is doing a Photoshop, like a graphic design type of project. Someone else might be doing a skit. Someone else is programming a story using Scratch. And you're getting to the same result, but you're letting students express themselves in the way that they feel comfortable and feel strong that they have the skills in that and are willing to kind of go beyond that. Because what I might cover teaching them in Photoshop or video production, if they're using that tool later in another setting, they're willing to learn kind of those deeper skills at higher level that I might not teach them as a whole class. But I think when they're in charge of their learning and have a lot more say in what that project is and how they're going to do it, I think they're more willing to explore and learn more deeply about it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely a part of it, but a couple of people are mentioning in the chat project-based learning, and that's absolutely a great example of that. Okay, and last here is discussion and empathy. So, how do you build empathy in your virtual class, and what does that look like?
I think part of that is, and part of this comes from, I've known some of my students if they're in 8th grade, I've had some of them since they were 4 and 5 years old. So I know them and I've known siblings, and that helps. But what I think is really nice is I'm very open with telling the kids when I'm struggling with something. I'm finding this really hard, or my computer I'm really frustrated that we can't log into this. And I think by me being willing to open and share when I'm stuck and I'm frustrated and they see that, they're willing to suggest, Ms. Dixon, what if we do this? Or let's try this. It works this way, let's try that. And I think by being willing to share, and I respect their advice and what they're sharing with me, what if we try this? Can we do? And I think that's nice that they see that. And I'm not just the person in charge, because I saw someone put in the chat, it humanizes you. And I think that's important. And I want them to see that I'm interested in what they're thinking, and hope that models them being able to show interest in what other students and classmates are thinking. And saying, oh, how did you do that? Or, oh, that's a really cool program. I'd like to learn about that.
Yeah, I love that. I think sharing your own experiences is a great way to lead that discussion. And someone had mentioned back in the chat as well, how can they talk about their feelings and if they can't identify them. And so I wonder, there's a couple of people who said that they use emojis. If the first step is being able to identify your own emotions, to be able to, empathize with another person, what kinds of tools do you use to do that?
I think I was at a workshop, and I thought this was a great idea. And a teacher had, it was even like a Google form, a quick survey. It was like a how are you feeling? And it had like four choices. 2 were positive, 2 were more negative. And if you're feeling happy or, excited, it triggered a response back. Great, I'm glad, let's keep this positive, mood going. Let's keep going with this. And if you checked off one of the struggling feelings, the message that came back to you, it's, wow, I hope, message me. Let's talk about how to get through this. Hopefully, we feel better after this class. Tomorrow's going to be another day. And it's kind of acknowledging that and giving them some response back to that feeling has been nice. And I try to, being able to be very honest and express with the students how I'm feeling has been really great. And I let them kind of talk about it and be silly. And we'll talk about, oh, Carter, you're looking really silly today. Are you having a very silly day? And we talk about who's feeling, even if it's a silly, happy emotion, and not just only looking for kids that are sad. We kind of like to talk about, especially as I'm waiting for all of my students to log into meetings or right at the end in between classes, having those couple of minutes to talk and notice how kids are feeling has been nice. And they'll talk to each other. Oh, you look sad. I'll see someone write in the chat. And let students kind of talk to each other. It's nice.
That's really sweet.
Yeah.
And I'm going to skip this one because we kind of talked through that, but any other last things to add on how to help your students learn empathy? So maybe there's a situation where a student is not being empathetic. How do you give your students those tools?
I think it's because your first kind of response is always like, don't hurt their feelings. That's wrong. And you want to almost like punish it when someone's being mean. And I think taking the time to talk about it, wow, those were really strong. I hear you're having really strong feelings. Can you tell me about it? And it's a little more difficult in the virtual setting because you feel like that you have to have that conversation in front of everybody unless you have more adults and you can go into a breakout room and like talk it through. But I think having that, can we say this in a different way? Or, it looks like you're feeling really frustrated. What else can we do? And I think you have to address those moments when that happens and, give them a way to express their feelings, but talk about how to do it in kind of in a more productive way.
I love those ideas. Yeah, absolutely. And not shaming them. I like that. Okay. We're running out of time here, but I wanted to talk a little bit about Unruly Spots. So this is one of the things that you use in your class, both virtually and in person, to combine STEM and play, and specifically, block coding, math, problem solving. So how Unruly Splats work is you'll see there's those physical tiles at the bottom. So students can code them to light up, make sounds, and they sense when they're stomped on or pressed, and they can make their own games with them. So things like relay races, dance games, whack-a-mole is a fan favorite, and obstacle courses. And you can see on the iPad there on the screen, there's those sort of virtual splats on the left-hand side where students can code them and play a game virtually so they don't actually need the physical spots. So I'm going to next show 2 quick videos on how it works and what it looks like.
Oh, I keep passing. All right, go back. Again. Should we do it again for you guys?
Yeah, do it for
You ready?
more times.
Okay, get ready. Go.
I'm scared.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Which one went up?
Oh! 5 jumping jacks. All right.
So that was a virtual class that we taught with a school in Ohio that is in person right now. And they were playing 4 corners, if you couldn't tell. And so we played a non-elimination version of that game. This was a grade 3 class where instead of being out when your corner's light went out, you instead had to do jumping jacks. And so that's what that kid was doing at the end. So we do have a number of different ways that ideally that would be played probably in smaller groups, depending on the social distance rules that you have at your school. But I'm going to show the next video is more of an open-ended sort of playful lesson plan that we have that incorporates music into coding. And so the students have coded the splats to play certain notes using the MIDI function. So MIDI just meaning that each note is assigned a number and they can code that number so that the splat actually plays the note. So I'm going to show you what that looks like.
Here we go. 2, ready, go.
So that was our musical splats activity. So students kind of start out by experimenting with a drum machine. I think Deb has also played this with her students over the summer break virtually. But eventually students can actually create their own song. So we had one student create his version of a Imagine Dragons song, which was really cool. And it was all virtual and focused on in the app. So they can press it on the screen rather than actually pressing on the physical splats. Okay. So I'm going to go through a few more examples of activities that Deb has played that are from our SEL activity pack, but a quick note before we take a look at them is they're all rooted in the CASEL framework, and each activity comes with a checklist, an SEL checklist, as well as some suggested discussion questions and strategies for sharing your thoughts or how you were working through a problem. And all of these activities, the code comes pre-downloaded, so it's not meant to necessarily be focused on the computer science aspect, but more on the aspects of working together, identifying your feelings, sharing your feelings with the rest of your teammates and everybody else who might be feeling the same feelings, and having that, exercising those empathy muscles. And so we understand that not everybody is able to have the physical splats, especially a lot of our customers whose their splats were stuck in their school and now they're virtual. So this is what it looks like in our app. It works with both iPads and Chrome browsers, Chromebooks. And this is what our blank screen kind of looks like. And you can see the splats over there on the left-hand panel, which you can connect with physical splats or not. So Deb, you've played this game, I think, maybe with your students or also, I think, with us on another webinar. Do you want to walk through, everyone sort of maybe has an idea of the Would You Rather game. Did you want to explain it?
Sure. So like the Would You Rather game, would you rather eat a Snickers bar or a bowl of spaghetti? And in person, you would step on one splat for one answer, and you'd step on the other splat for the other answer. But virtually being able to use this, students are able to put in the chat their answer. They could put the A or the B. And by pressing on the slats that are over on the left, pressing to vote lights up one of the little LED dots. So it is a visual counter of what the votes are. And it's kind of fun to see. And I mean, the kids will have any opportunity to put something in the chat. So by putting their votes in there, then they could see it visually on the screen, which one has the most votes. It's been a fun game to play, and I've done this and it works virtually.
Exactly. So this game is basically a complicated version of a very basic voting machine. And one of my favorite questions that students have come up with are, would you rather speak every language in the entire world or be able to talk to animals? And so the goal of the SEL objective is to break your students into smaller groups to come up with a consensus. What is your would you rather question? So students need to work together to come up with the 2 questions for the would you rather. And, you know, the winner is whichever group can work together to do it first. And so then you get to play everybody's game, would you rather. And so it's just a fun way to get students working together and maybe creating those challenges for them to work out as a team, but then also getting to play together and experiencing the game that you created. This is another really fun one that, yeah, how does it work, Deb?
I was going to say Monster Maker has been a lot of fun. I've seen art teachers teach something similar called Exquisite Corpse, where they're passing a paper around and you're each drawing a different segment of the body. What's nice on Splats is there's lots of sounds built in. So in this one, you're using the animal sounds to be able to draw a section on using just a Google Doc that has the drawing boxes. So each kid does this simple code, and the blocks you see here is the only code that they need. So once they press that, I have the kids pick, okay, do you want the head, do you want the tummy, or do you want the feet? And then they'll pick which one they want to draw, and then they program this, and then when they press Splat 1 on their end, I might hear a chicken, the person that's doing the stomach might have cow, and someone else might have cat for like the feet. And then we each have 30 seconds to draw in our box and try to link them together. And it's always fun and silly to see how these things come out, because I am horrible at drawing using a touchpad, but I tell the kids that makes it even more fun when it comes out completely ridiculous and silly. And it's kind of a fun activity. And once the 30 seconds are done, you save and close, and it puts all your pictures together into a creation. And it's a lot of fun to be able to play around with.
Yeah, this is an example of a Monster Maker gone awry, where there was some confusion around who was drawing what. But as you said, Deb, that's okay. It just makes it even more fun and silly. Here's one that actually sort of worked out. You can see the lines there. So these are all available in an open Google Doc that you can copy. And when you click into it, the students use the scribble tool in the Google Docs, as Deb said, to create whatever animal that the code told them to make, and then whatever they were assigned, the top, middle, and bottom. And so it just creates these really funny, silly ending things where the students get to work together to actually code their monster. Another great example of this is our Found Art Challenge. Here, Deb, why don't you explain what it is?
To say, I did this at the beginning of the year for all my students in grades kindergarten through 8th grade. Our pre-K started a little bit later, so I didn't do it with them. And this was so much fun to do, because what the program does is that there's a whistle with like a, you know, and then the splat flash and end up on a random color. And if the color shows red, you have to run around your house and find a red object and bring it back to the place where you're sitting. And then there's a countdown. It counts down from 10. So, you know, you have to hurry up if you haven't found your object. And then the next color might be blue. So you find a blue object. And then once you have your 5 objects, you construct them into some kind of sculpture. And there's a few examples of them. And I find it's hysterical what you put together and find. And when I did it with so many of my classes, my desk was covered in toys that belong to my kids. I've done it with so many classes. And it was so much fun. And you're having discussion as you're finding objects. Look at I found a red notebook. And they come back and they're excited that they found something red. And it's like, you know, no, don't take something breakable, because we're building with it. And we had just a really good time talking and discussing as we were playing the game and building with it. So this was great for all ages. And my middle schoolers played it and had a blast with it.
Awesome. These are some of the examples of things that we did at the Unruly team as examples for our Found Art Challenge. We had a question to recap the 4 ways. I know some of you might have to hop off now. We'll go a little bit over time, but the 4 ways to combine STEM and SEL, we had collaborative play, we had student-led learning, we had classroom community, and then discussion and empathy. All right. So we have a ton of more virtual resources. I won't go through all of them. We had a really fun voting activity pack. These are all available on our website. I'll put the link in the chat here, and they're free, so you can check them out. And they work on our virtual platform, so you don't need to buy anything to try them out. But we had a really fun voting activity pack, which kind of taught the difference between ranked choice voting and just regular majority voting, which was actually very enlightening for all of us, as we did vote on that in Massachusetts for ranked choice voting on our ballots this year. So it was kind of cool to see how it really works. And just a note, we do have some guidelines. If you are able to be in person with some of your students, we have some guidelines on socially distanced play. This was a really fun math problem that one of my teammates got to figure out. So all of the students, if you put them in a 9-foot circle, will still be 6 feet apart. And so there's lots of different ways that you can kind of adjust your games so that it is safe for hybrid learning. So we have little sticky notes that we put on all of our activities now on tips for, playing together in smaller groups, or if you're going to be remote only. All right, and just a quick note on funding. We are actually CARES Act eligible, so if your school is receiving or applying for funds from the CARES Act, we do align with a lot of that. So I can share some of the resources in the chat here for how we are eligible for CARES Act. I'll put that in the chat if anybody has any questions about that. Somebody had asked about the cost of Splats. So we do them as memberships, and we suggest either a 1- or 3-year plan with 12 Splats sort of being the starting pack, but it will depend on the type of plan you have. And so we like to chat for 15 minutes just on the phone to get a sense for sort of what are your biggest needs and what we think will be the best plan. So if you are interested in getting a quote, I'll put another link in the chat. If you just request a quick call, somebody will follow up with you via email to send you a quote. And we have a special actually going on for everybody in the webinar today. You'll get 2 free Splats when you request a demo before November 15th. So if you fill out that form that I just linked, the request a call form, and chat with somebody before November 15th, we'll throw in an extra 2 Splats if you get on a call with one of our team members to kind of walk through what might be best for you. So that's all we have for you today. Our website is unrulyspots.com. My name is Lauren. I've put my email here as well. I'm happy to send out this slide deck, and I'm sure there'll be a recording as well available to everybody who attended today, so I have no problem. We'll follow up with that, I'm sure. And if you have any questions, please feel free to write us in the chat. I know a lot of you have to go, but would love to hear from some of you on sort of your thoughts on SEL. I saw the chat was very active today, and I'm so happy about that. So please feel free to write us in the chat if you have any lingering questions.